Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Future is Now podcast. Thank you so much for joining and listening in. I think we're on episode 14 now, which is kind of crazy. And so I'm excited for today's episode. No guests. It's just me, Jess Spencer. So I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, if you haven't yet, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a review. Make sure to rate this podcast. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. You get alerts when new episodes are coming out. You get exclusive content coming up here soon. So make sure that you subscribe to the Future is Now podcast. And if you are subscribed, I just want to say thank you for just supporting the channel, supporting the podcast. It means a lot. We're getting a lot of cool stories in because of this podcast. And so I'm just very, very excited. And I say this every single time there's a solo podcast, but I'm really excited on the direction that this is going. And so I'm excited to talk today on a very specific topic when it comes to leadership, when it comes to faith, kind of a mixture of both. What we're going to be talking about today is the pattern and the way that we think. It's a topic that I feel like has been something that I've been wrestling with a lot lately, just in terms of the way that we think, the way that we guard ourselves, especially as leaders, as Christians, the way that we process thought. And so today we're just going to be talking about, as a leader, as a follower of Christ, what does it mean to be wise in the way that we think, and what is the power of your mind? Because when you think about it, your mind and your thoughts and your thinking, it dictates every single thing that you do, right? I mean, there's no action that happens without you thinking it first. Now, the thought might be subconscious. It might be something that you're not even aware of, but your brain has to think it for you to act in a certain way. And so today I'm excited because we're going to be talking about your thought life, your thinking, and how to grow that, how to develop it, and how to mature it. I don't know about you, but I've always been in a season where there's times where I screw up and I mess up just because, I'm human. I make stupid decisions. And I feel like sometimes as a guy, especially in the terms of like thinking patterns, like there's a lot of times where I'll sit back and I'll think, what was I thinking? Like hindsight is always 20/20, and you'll always think that. What was I thinking? And sometimes we do stupid things, but after the fact, you're like, how did I rationalize that to myself? And it could be the dumbest thing. I remember when I was in high school, this is like right after we got my license, and I wasn't even the one driving, but all of our friends started getting licenses around the same time. And so everybody was super pumped about it. So we were picking up my friend in Buckley, and he lived out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere. If you don't know where Buckley is, it's like, there's nothing out there. And so we drove out to Buckley, and there's like this long road to get to his house, this gravel road. So we drove into the house, and we picked up my friend, and there was no like place to turn around, right? Like there's no roundabout. So what we did is we just had to flip it in reverse. And so we started flipping it in reverse. We started driving backwards. It was me and a couple of buddies, and we were in a Jeep. And we're just driving backwards, probably for a good half mile, honestly, like to get out of the neighborhood. Then we get out into the main road. And I say to my friend, I'm like, you won't just keep driving in reverse. Like, well, thinking back, I'm like, what? I'm literally the biggest idiot in the world for thinking that. But he, of course, like high schooler gets challenged, and he's like, yeah, want to bet? So he starts driving in reverse. And we're driving probably like 10 miles per hour in reverse. And my other friend is like, I bet you won't drive faster. Like, how is this a smart decision? Like, how are we rationalizing this in our mind? But my friend, he starts going faster and faster. All of a sudden, we're going like 40 miles per hour. And he starts to lose control a little bit. And we it's like you start to literally panic, and before he can slow down, the car is jerking left and right, and all of a sudden it comes up on two wheels, and we're just about tipping over, comes back down. We take a sharp right into the woods. We just go like probably 20 feet into the woods through bushes, and we literally were like 2 feet away from getting destroyed by this giant tree. And we were sitting there in shock for like a minute. Like, what the heck just happened? And luckily, none of us were hurt. Luckily, the Jeeps are indestructible. The Jeeps weren't even hurt. And so it's pretty crazy. I look back on that and I think about this and I think, how did I let my mind get to a place where I thought that that was a good decision, right? Like, how in the world could I possibly rationalize that that was a smart decision? But that's so funny because my thoughts somehow dictated my behavior and actually overrode what I would consider being safe. And in that moment, I was ruled by my thoughts. And I was thinking about this story, and I was thinking about how many times as Christians we come to a place where we don't think about our thought life a lot, but honestly, you either rule your thoughts or you're being ruled by your thoughts, right? I'll say that again. You're either ruling your thoughts or you're being ruled by your thoughts. And it's crazy because life is about making boundaries and steps and leaps and, growing ourselves. And what I found is like a lot of people in faith, they have boundaries for a lot of things, but rarely do they have boundaries for their thought life, right? We have physical boundaries in terms of like, oh, I'm going to go on a diet, right? I'm not going to eat this food. I'm not going to drink this. I want to be healthy physically, so I'm going to set boundaries there. Spiritually, you look at it like, okay, I want to live a healthy spiritual life. I see that there's this type of sin and this type of sin that I struggle with. Okay, I'm going to put boundaries in place so that I don't mess up, so that I'm healthy spiritually, financially. That's why you have budgets, is because you want to be healthy financially. You want to be able to grow. But when is the last time that you created boundaries for your thought life? I mean, I was thinking about this and I was really taken back on, wow, I don't think I have a lot of boundaries for my thought life. But why is that? Why don't we have boundaries for something that is so crucial and pivotal, especially in what the Bible says about our thought life? And I think it was very telling when this pandemic happened. There was a study that came out that said that 56% of young adults said that they struggled with anxiety and depression during COVID, during the pandemic. I mean, think about that. Over half, looking on the street, looking at a young adult service, looking at a college campus, every other person, essentially, more than that, was struggling with anxiety and depression, which is insane, which is crazy to think about. But it's happening because we have an overexposure of material in this world, of news, of social media, of Instagram, of TikTok, of our Facebook. We have an overexposure of that. And I'm not saying that's inherently evil, but when you don't have any boundaries in your thought life, you'll let your thoughts run. And all of a sudden your thoughts will become truth to you, right? So what happened during the pandemic is that so many young adults' lives slowed down, right? To where they were really thinking. And when they were really thinking, they realized they didn't have boundaries in their thought life, and that led to destructive thinking that affected their mental and emotional health. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And your mind is a river. Don't get it twisted. Nothing will go in your mind. Nothing will go in here that doesn't eventually come out. It's a river. Anything that goes in will eventually come out. So anything that you consume, anything that you think, anything that you're letting in will eventually make its way out in a healthy or an unhealthy way. And so because of that, we have to be so careful in the way that we're thinking. And I was also thinking about how our thought life is the most difficult thing to get a grip on. It's the most difficult thing to really get obedient with. Why? Is because there is zero accountability with it. I mean, think about this, right? I can ask my friend, hey, I don't want to swear anymore. I don't want to swear, right? Then when we're hanging out, if I swear, he sees it, he calls it out. Okay, that's accountability. Maybe I don't want to act a certain way. Hey, I want to, drink less. I want to go out less. I want to take more time for myself. People can see that and hold me accountable to it. What I'm saying is, like, people can hear what you say. People can see what you do, but people will never see what you think. That is something that only you and God know. And because of that, it makes it one of the most dangerous places to not have obedience in, and it becomes one of the number one most common destinations that the enemy will try and get you at. He'll try and get your thought life. He'll try and get your mental health. He'll try and control how you're thinking about things, because he understands that nobody will truly know what you wrestle with besides yourself. And unless you tell somebody, nobody will ever know. And so that's why it's one of the most difficult things to handle. It's one of the most difficult and crucial things as a leader that we need to overcome. I mean, you hear all the cliches of like successful people, and it's like, it starts with your mind. It starts with a mindset, success mindset. Wake up every day, gratitude, and a lot of that is super cliche, and a lot of that, like, I watch and I'll roll my eyes at because we've heard it 1,000 times. But it's so true. It's so true that our thought life is sacred. It's important. We need to be wise in the ways that we're thinking about things, because what we think about, what we let in, what comes out, what we think about dictates our actions. And I love in Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not be conformed by the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what the will of God is, what is good and acceptable and perfect." So if you want to truly understand the will of God for your life, if you really want to follow in what he has for us, we have to what? Be transformed by the renewal of our mind. Renewing your mind, what does that even mean? Renewing your mind. It means we as Christians have to think differently. We have to submit our thoughts to the Lord instead of ourselves. Because I don't know about you, but if I think something, right, and it's not a good thought, it can go down this rabbit hole where all of a sudden I'm coming up with realities in my life that don't even exist, right? I think we've all done it at night when you're thinking, and all of a sudden you get on this crazy tangent, and all of a sudden you're panicking about things that there's no way they're actually going to happen in real life. But that's just how thoughts affect us as leaders. And so, we're going to look at a Bible story here. And it's a story of Moses. It's my favorite story in the Bible, in Exodus. And just to give you a little bit of context, Moses is a Hebrew that God called. At the time, the Israelites, the nation of Israel, was enslaved in Egypt by the Egyptians, by Pharaoh. And Moses was born actually in royalty. Okay, so you flash back, and his mom basically hid him. And he was found by the Pharaoh's daughter who raised him. So he was raised in royalty. Well, as he grew up, he's a Hebrew, right? So he sees his brothers and sisters getting persecuted by the Egyptians. And one day he sees one of his brothers, his Hebrew brothers, being basically treated terribly and beat by one of the Egyptian soldiers. And he intervened. He actually accidentally killed, well, I don't know about accidentally, but he killed the Egyptian, and he had to run away. So after that, he ran away, and he was basically run off as a shepherd for 40 years of his life, right? So we're going to come up in Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. So what happens after that is God reveals himself to Moses, right? The Israelites are still in slavery to the Egyptians, and God reveals himself to Moses through a burning bush. And he tells Moses, you are going to be the one to deliver my people. I'm going to use you to deliver my people. And so we're basically going to pick up in Exodus chapter 4, verse 1 through 5. And it says, "Then Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? He said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, put out your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. So this is actually a pretty pivotal moment for Moses, because what we don't see here is this is Exodus chapter 4. So in Exodus chapter 3, when God was telling Moses what was going to happen, God told Moses, the people will listen to you. The people will believe you. And in Exodus chapter 4, the first thing that Moses said is, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. So essentially, God said, this is how it's going to go. And Moses said, I disagree. I don't believe you. And not having a belief in what God is telling us to do seems like a pretty big red flag. And it's very telling on the season that Moses is in. Because you think about it, he was just in a season where he was carrying shame of his failure with him, right? He killed somebody and he ran away. He was in that season for 40 years. And after that, I could only imagine what your thought would be on, oh, what can I accomplish? How would people listen to me? Even if God is telling me this is how it's going to be, I'd have a hard time believing it because of the past season. And I think that's a place where a lot of leaders can be, where I've had several conversations with people that says, hey, I know that the Bible says this, but I can't believe that's true in my life. Maybe you've read the Bible, right? And you read about how God calls you beautiful. You read about how God calls you to incredible plans. You believe, or you read that he gives you strength for the day, that he gives you a peace beyond understanding. And you're sitting there thinking, that's awesome, but I don't really know if that's for me. And the reason a lot of times that affects our thinking is because we can have a huge block in the way that we think and the way that we process because we are held captive by our past. And so the first thing that we need to do in order to get to a better pattern of thinking and to get to a wise place of thinking as a leader and as a follower of God is releasing our past. You have to release your past. Now, what do I mean by that? I love this scenario that God is talking to Moses because God says, what do you have in your hand? And Moses is like, hey, it's a staff. So this is a shepherd's staff. This is something that he used in his last season that he was carrying shame and carrying guilt with. So it's kind of crazy because what happened to him in the past is affecting how he's seeing things today. Have you ever something happens to you in the past and it kind of gives you PTSD, right? Like I was stung as a kid by bees, so I hate bees, right? Like I've been bitten by spiders, so I hate spiders. Like I don't get those psychopaths that like bees that are like, oh, and they'll let spiders crawl on them. Psychopaths. I do not trust them because I've had a prior experience and it's affected the way that I see my reality today. But this is an amazing moment because God releases Moses' past in two ways. Now, what does release mean, right? There's two parts of being released. One definition of being released is being set free. So think about like something in a cage. You open the cage, sets it free. The other part of being released, another definition, is to allow to move. So think about releasing a bow or an arrow, right? Bow and arrow, like shooting an arrow. That's releasing it. It's allowing it to move. It's a forward trajectory. And so there's a duality of God's message of releasing Moses from his past and using his staff because he is saying that, hey, you don't have to feel shame about this last season. Check this out. I'm still calling you to an incredible future. I'm still calling you to something significant. Oh, and not only do you have to not feel shame about your past, but I'm going to use that staff. I'm going to use what was in your past, an aspect of it, to fulfill the calling that I have for you today. Moses was both set free from his past, but he took something from his past to use in his current ministry. And the reason that I love this is because as leaders, sometimes in our thoughts, sometimes in the way that we think, we're in two categories. We are either so held captive by our past that we are crippled by today in the shame of what we used to do, or we just decide to not ever think about it. And so because we don't think about it, we miss the significance that it was for our ministry today. And so I love because the past, this is what I love. The past is a great teacher. It is just a terrible Lord. The past is a great teacher to learn from. It is a terrible authority over your life. Wisdom in our thinking pattern in accepting our past is not carrying shame, but allowing God to turn our mistakes into testimonies. I love that. Wisdom is thinking about our past and that we're not carrying the shame, but we're allowing God to turn our mistakes into a testimony. Now, after this, Moses finally agrees. He says, okay, fine, I'll do it. He had a lot of objections. Hey, I can't do this. I can't do this. Every time he said, hey, I am not, God said, I am, right? So he got over the past. He got over the shame and the guilt. So then he's stepping into his ministry. And that comes up to our second point on maturing the way that we think, thinking in a wise way. And that's this: face your present. Face your present. In Exodus 5:22 through 23. So basically Moses, he goes to Pharaoh and he delivers God's message. And Pharaoh laughs in his face and says, are you kidding me? Why would I do that? And so what he does is he actually makes work harder for all the Israelites. He punishes the Israelites because of Moses. Now Moses comes back to the Lord, and he says this in Exodus 5:22. He says, then Moses turned to the Lord and said, "O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all." So Moses is frustrated with God. He comes to him. He's like, why the heck did you tell me to do this when it's not working? And some people would attribute that to doubt, but this is a big step in the way that Moses sees God and thinks about God and thinks about himself. Because check this out. In Moses' past, he murdered somebody and he ran away. Something didn't work out. There was a failure and he ran away. In this scenario, you see Moses' growth in the way that he thinks, because he fails essentially. And instead of running away, he runs to God. Instead of feeling shame and crawling out, he faces his reality, even as frustrating as it is, and he brings it to God. We tend to run and avoid destructive thoughts. Have you ever noticed that? Like, we tend to run away. We don't want to face realities that are uncomfortable. We don't like being comfortable. Our flesh does not like being uncomfortable. And we tend to rationalize them. And there's actually something, a lot of studies have been done on it. It's called self-deception. And the studies say that we are the best liars to ourselves. Like, we're really effective liars when we're lying to ourselves. And we'll believe ourselves. And people are pretty good at detecting lies from other people, and we're awful at detecting lies to ourselves. And we lie to ourselves all the time to make it more comfortable, to avoid hard truths, to avoid hard realities. Now, it's like, have you ever known that person, that guy or girl that's like thinks that they're a great driver, right? And you get in the car with them and you're like afraid for your life the entire time. Like, they're terrible drivers. Or like singers. Have you ever like known someone that thinks they're a good singer? Oh, and they're not, and they're terrible. They just lie to themselves. Sometimes you tell yourself you're going to go to the gym today. But when you know in the back of your head, you know right here, you're not going to go to the gym today. Or like, you're talking to someone and you're like, yeah, we'll hang out. When you know that you're not going to hang out. And it's like, we lie to ourselves all the time. And the more that we lie to ourselves, the easier it gets. And the more that we lie to ourselves, the more that we're able to start living a duplicitous life within ourselves, to where we tell ourselves one thing, but we know it's not true and we act another way. And I love 2 Corinthians 10:5. It says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. I love that. We take every thought captive. That is how we become wise in our thinking, is we face realities, we take in our thoughts, we face it, and we make it submit to Christ. On average, people have 50,000 thoughts a day. It's very hard to comprehend, right? 50,000 thoughts a day. The craziest thing about that is 80% of those thoughts are negative. 80% of the 50,000 thoughts that we think a day, and that's on average, are negative. So if we're not taking every thought captive, we're allowing ourselves to just think and ponder, and whatever comes in, and I'm not going to have a filter for anything, 80% of that is unhealthy thoughts. So if you're here today and you're like, man, I have such an unhealthy mental life when it comes to how I think about myself, how I think about others, how I think about the world, ask yourself the question, do you have a filter for your thoughts? Or do you just allow everything to come in without any type of filter? There's a difference between a thought and continued thinking, right? So what is defense mechanism? We have to have a defense mechanism that stops unhealthy thoughts. It comes in, we grab it, we make it submit, and then we release it. And that's what's something that's so underrated when it comes to, and it's like not like a here's 3 steps to do it. It's a process. It's a journey that you have to take with the Lord, with your own spiritual relationship with the Lord. It's something that's very personal that you have to work on every single day, but you have to be intentional with it, and you have to recognize, okay, if this thought's coming in, it's not good. I'm not going to think that. I bind it in Jesus' name. I release it, and then you go about your day. And once you start doing that, you'll start noticing how many negative thoughts actually come into your mind. And that kind of leads to just like the third idea with thinking is, you have to be released from your past. You have to face your current reality. And once you do those 2 things, it'll give you trust for God's future. Because people in their thinking are facing strongholds yesterday, today, and tomorrow. There's unhealthy thinking pattern for yesterday, your past. There's unhealthy thinking for the way that you're thinking about today. And there's skepticism, and there's unhealthy thinking about tomorrow. And it's incredible to see the journey of Moses, right? We talked about, okay, he was doubting, he had shame, he got over that with the Lord, he worked through it, he brought his failures to God. And what eventually happened with Pharaoh is God told him to go back. He told him it's all part of the plan. And Moses was faithful, and everything that God said would happen, happened. He brought 10 plagues. And then Pharaoh finally said after the plagues, okay, fine, your people can go free. So Moses leads all of the nation of Israel out of Egypt. But then Pharaoh changes his mind and starts pursuing the Israelites and Moses as they're escaping. And we get to Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 through 14. And this is a pretty incredible depiction of the growth that Moses has had in the way that he thinks about himself and the way that he thinks about the Lord. Check this out in chapter 14, verse 10. It says, when Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. So they look up, they see all the Egyptians coming at them, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us in bringing us out to Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which we will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. This is such an incredible development of Moses. Just 10 chapters ago, Moses was talking about how he was not good enough, how nobody would listen to him, how he had fear, how there was skepticism because of what he did in the past. And now, check this out. The people around him are fearful. They're fearful of what's coming at them. They're doubting. They're angry. They're frustrated. They have no confidence in Moses. They have no confidence in God. And Moses turns to them. He says, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which we will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. See, Moses was released from his past, ran to God in his present, and because of that, God prepared him to trust him in the future. It's an incredible story, and it's an incredible testament to the way that we have to mature in the way that we think about ourselves and we think about God, and what we let in that will eventually come out. He was able to lead those around him because of the change of thought that he had. So all that to say is there was no hesitation when the time came and he parted the Red Sea. I mean, right after this, he literally rose up his staff, same staff that God used from his past, split the Red Sea. They went through and then it closed on the Egyptians. There is so much power in the way that you think. And the enemy would love nothing than to you to have no boundaries on the way that you think, to be held captive by your past and allow that to be the authority and allow that to have the monopoly of your mind. Your mind is a powerful place where dreams are formed, where conviction is formed, where we can understand what to do and what not to do. And because of that, it's a precious thing that us as leaders, we have to recognize as being vital. So not too long of an episode today, I know, but that's just something that was on my heart, that we have to have the ability as leaders to have boundaries for our thoughts. What is it? Tell me, what are your boundaries for the way that you're thinking? What are you letting in and what are you not? Write it down. Follow it every single day, and you'll see that your mental health, the way that you're thinking, will improve dramatically. So thank you again for checking out The Future Is Now. Thank you again for listening to this episode. It really means the world to me that you would, take time out of your day to listen or to watch. So thank you again. Watch what you're thinking. Meditate on this week and ask the Lord to just reveal maybe some unhealthy things that or thinking patterns that you have had, and start to work through that. It'll help you in immense ways. I hope that your day is blessed. I hope that you grow as a leader and a follower of the Lord. Until next week, we'll see you. Thanks again. Make sure to subscribe, and we're out. See you next week.